Why would Jesus call himself the Son of Man? It sounds a bit ordinary, right? We'll figure that out soon. And why would Jesus cast out demons and let them go into a herd of pigs and kill thousands of them? That wasn't a very popular decision. All of that's in Matthew chapter 8. Let's read. When he came down from the mountain, great multitudes followed him. And behold, a leper came to him and worshipped him, saying, Lord, if you want to, you can make me clean. Jesus stretched out his hand and touched him, saying, I want to. Be made clean. Immediately his leprosy was cleansed. Jesus said to him, See that you tell nobody, but go, show yourself to the priest, and offer the gift that Moses commanded as a testimony to them. When he came into Capernaum, a centurion came to him, asking him for help, saying, Lord, my servant lies in the house paralyzed, grievously tormented. Jesus said to him, I will come and heal him. The centurion answered, Lord, I am not worthy for you to come under my roof. Just say the word, and my servant will be healed. For I am also a man under authority, having under myself soldiers. I tell this one, Go, and he goes, and tell another, Come, and he comes, and tell my servant, Do this, and he does it. When Jesus heard it, he marveled and said to those who followed, Most certainly I tell you, I haven't found so great a faith, not even in Israel. I tell you that many will come from the east and the west, and will sit down with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob in the kingdom of heaven. But the children of the kingdom will be thrown into outer darkness. There will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Jesus said to the centurion, Go your way. Let it be done for you as you have believed. His servant was healed in that hour. When Jesus came into Peter's house, he saw his wife's mother lying sick with a fever. He touched her hand, and the fever left her. Then she got up and served. When evening came, they brought to him many possessed with demons. He cast out the spirits with a word and healed all who were sick, that it might be fulfilled that which was spoken through Isaiah the prophet, saying, He took our infirmities and bore our sicknesses. Now, when Jesus saw great multitudes around him, he gave the order to depart to the other side. A scribe came to him and said to him, Teacher, I will follow you wherever you go. Jesus said to him, The foxes have holes, and the birds of the sky have nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head. Another of his disciples said to him, Lord, allow me first to bury my father. But Jesus said to him, Follow me, and leave the dead to bury their own dead. When he got into a boat, his disciples followed him. Behold, a violent storm came up on the sea, so much that the boat was covered with the waves, but he was asleep. The disciples came to him and woke him up, saying, Save us, Lord, we are dying. He said to them, Why are you so fearful, you of little faith? Then he got up, rebuked the wind and the sea, and there was great calm. The men marveled, What kind of man is this, that even the wind and the sea obey him? When he came to the other side, into the country of the Gergesenes, 2 people possessed by demons met him there, coming out of the tombs, exceedingly fierce, so that nobody could pass that way. Behold, they cried out, saying, What do we have to do with you, Jesus, Son of God? Have you come here to torment us? Now there was a herd of many pigs feeding far from them. The demons begged him, saying, If you cast us out, permit us to go into the herd of pigs. He said to them, Go. They came out and went into the herd of pigs, and behold, the whole herd of pigs rushed down the cliff into the sea and died in the water. Those who fed them fled away and went into the city and said everything, including what happened to those who were possessed with the demons. Behold, all the city came out to meet Jesus. When they saw him, they begged that he would depart from their borders. Well, the Sermon on the Mount is over. Jesus has preached this huge Sermon on the Mount to a lot of people. And now he comes down from this mountain and he goes into Capernaum. Now, we mentioned a few chapters ago, or quite a few videos ago, that Jesus had set up his ministry in Capernaum. We all know that Jesus is called a Nazarene because he came from the town of Nazareth. But that's not where he set up his ministry. Like, he's not based in Nazareth. That's where he grew up. But he's based in Capernaum, which is, 15 or 20 kilometres away. It's close, but it's far. It's a walk. So Jesus is based in Capernaum, where the sea is. And my understanding is it's just a small little town. A couple of hundred people. That's it. And Jesus is in Capernaum, and people are wanting him to heal them. And he heals many, many people. Now, on his way down from the mountain, he meets a leper. And the leper says, "Lord, if you want to, you can make me clean." And Jesus does want to. And by the way, this leprosy isn't necessarily the leprosy you're thinking of. The modern disease of leprosy is also called Hansen's disease. It's a terrible disease, like your fingers start rotting and fall off, and your legs, and eventually your body just falls apart. It could have been that disease, but there were a lot of ancient diseases under the category of leprosy. It was whatever it was terrible, and it was so bad that they would isolate people with leprosy, and they weren't allowed contact with anyone. They weren't allowed to touch anyone. They had to call out unclean so that people around them would know they had this disease. It was like a form of healthcare for everyone else. When we were going through the Old Testament, we talked about leprosy. In the book of Leviticus, there was several chapters that talked about the treatment of skin diseases. So you're not allowed to touch a leper. They're not allowed to even be near people, but for some reason this leper is near them as they're coming down. Jesus says he's willing. Get a load of this. This is verse 3. Jesus stretched out his hand and touched him and said, I want to heal you. Be clean. Oh, I just think that God is so kind. He's not just thinking of the physical sickness that needs to be healed. He's thinking of the poor bloke that hasn't experienced human touch for God knows how long. A decade, let's say. Here's someone starved for human touch. They want to be clean. Jesus touches him and says, I want to. I think it's really, really cool. And these little types of things, they show you the heart of God that cares for people. And then Jesus says, don't tell anyone, just go show the priest. And there's this debate about why did Jesus say don't tell anyone? And, the typical answer is, Jesus was humble. He didn't want to make a fuss and say how great he was. And it's an example for us to be humble. Well, that could be the case. He definitely was a humble Jesus. But at the same time, if he had to go show himself to the priest. The priest has to give the word, you're clean now. That's according to the rules of Leviticus, which we've talked about, 3 years ago. If he doesn't get that tick of approval from the priest, he's still an outcast. But there were priests that didn't like Jesus. So if he goes around saying, Jesus healed me, Jesus healed me, Jesus healed me, and he happens to bump into a priest to get his tick of approval, but that priest doesn't like Jesus, well, there's a practical reason for not saying anything. So Jesus, no doubt, is humble, doesn't want to big note himself, but at the same time, Jesus is also smart. It's like, don't tell anyone. Just show yourself to the priest and say, I'm better. The priest looks good to me. Well, maybe he could say after that. I don't know. But that's a practical reason why maybe saying nothing was, why that advice was given. Jesus, so caring and so smart. And so Jesus goes to Capernaum and he's healing people. And then the centurion comes to him. And I think it's really interesting that we've, all the way through the Bible, all the way through the New Testament, there's a series of centurions. One of the commentators I like to read, Bert Kaufman, he had a whole big thing about all the centurions in the Bible. There's like about 6 of them. Every single time a centurion gets mentioned, it's a positive thing. Like here we've got this centurion who's got such great faith. This centurion's faith is so amazing. Jesus actually says, I have not found such great faith as this in all of Israel. And what I realized, in fact, as I was reading that to you just now, sometimes I make my notes, but sometimes as I'm reading the Bible to you, I have even more thoughts. as I was reading it to you, it occurred to me, wow, Jesus is actually looking to see what faith there is. Like he says, I haven't found such faith like this in all of Israel. In other words, I've been looking, but look what I found. This faith isn't even an Israelite. It's not even a Jewish person. It's a centurion, a Roman, a Gentile. The best example of faith in the Bible, you could say, wasn't even a Jewish person. It was a Roman centurion. And then Jesus says, I tell you what, people are going to come from the east and west and sit down at Abraham's table, but the children of the kingdom will be cast out. In other words, what Jesus was saying was, you are the people of God. You're the Jewish people. Why don't you have faith? Some of you are not even going to be included in God's plans. But here's this Gentile. People are going to come from the east. People are going to come from all over the world and be a part of God's kingdom. That's the Gentiles. And we've been included. It's amazing. And the kingdom of God will include Jews and Gentiles. But of course, in the mind of all the people listening to him, they're thinking the kingdom's only for Jewish people, not for Gentiles. But Jesus is saying, the best example of faith I've ever found isn't even a Jewish person. So, there's a series of good centurions, and this guy's one of them. And there's a whole bunch of them in the book of Acts. There's the one that stood at the foot of the cross when Jesus died, and that centurion said, surely this was the Son of God. Every time you bump into a centurion in the Bible, it's a good encounter. The first Gentile Christian in the book of Acts was Cornelius. He was a centurion as well. So Jesus marveled at his faith, and it reminds us he's looking for faith. He's looking to see us with faith. And then, of course, Jesus goes to Peter's house. Now, one of the commentators I was listening to, this was not Bert Kaufman, he's the guy I like to read, but Bill Creasy is the guy I listen to. So there's not that many commentators you can listen to. Like, because I've got so much time driving, I listen. So I listen to James Montgomery Boyce sometimes. I have at times listened to Chuck Missler, although I think he's completely wrong about just some stuff. Like all his dispensational, all his end-of-the-world stuff, his perspectives on Israel. He thinks there's like two Israels, like the Old Testament Israel, they're the real children of God, and then there's the church, that's the spiritual Israel. No, there's only one Israel. So I think Chuck Missler's wrong about a whole pile of stuff, but he has a lot of other stuff that's really good. So I listen to him sometimes, but I'm thoughtful. But I listen to him, James Montgomery Boyce, a Presbyterian guy, and Bill Creasy. All of these are like audible commentaries. You can listen to them online as you're driving your car. And but I read as well Bert Kaufman and others, Matthew Henry sometimes, and David Guzik sometimes. But it was Bill Creasy who was saying that Capernaum, where Jesus lives, he said it's a little town. It's like a town of like 200 to 300 people. And he said that we've discovered the house that's believed to be where Jesus lived. Now, I haven't checked it up to verify it, but it seems like the synagogue is in town, and Jesus is just a few doors away, and Peter's house is just a few doors away. It seems like they're all just it's just a few streets, and they all live within a range. They all know each other. So we've got these stories of Jesus healing people in Capernaum, but these are his neighbors. It'd be like your next door neighbor saying, my mum's not feeling well, can you come and pray for her? It's like that. So Jesus goes to Peter's house, but it's literally just a few doors away. And he prays for Peter's mother-in-law. So Peter's married. Peter's an older, Jesus has all these disciples, he has 12. They're not all the same age. Peter is older, he's married. It's thought that he's at least the same age as Jesus, 30 or older. He might even be older than Jesus. Peter has a wife, quite possibly had children. He has a mother-in-law. And I know Catholic Christians, they are really big on celibacy. But they believe Peter's the first pope. That's also a debate, but they believe that. But here we have you could say, a pope that was married. That's an interesting whole point. But Jesus goes into his house and pray, and it says he laid hands. Where is it? He put hands on the mother-in-law and healed her. So there's another example of touch, the kindness of God. And then it says, when evening came, Many were brought to him with demons. He cast out the demons. He healed all who were sick, that it might be fulfilled that which was spoken through Isaiah the prophet. He took our infirmities and bore our diseases. So the Messiah is prophesied in Isaiah 53. He's going to do all these types of things like heal the sick, cast out demons. Well, Jesus is doing it all, demonstrating that he is the Messiah. So he's preached an amazing sermon. That's the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew 5, 6, and 7. Now he's becoming really popular, and now he's starting to do signs and prove he's the Messiah. He doesn't just preach with authority. He gives signs, even to his own disciples, calming the wind and the waves. We get down to the end of this chapter. There's so many things that I'm not splitting this chapter up, but there's two things I want to mention. One is that this man comes to him. Jesus says, "Follow me." And the man says, "Let me go bury my father first." And Jesus says, "Let the dead bury their own dead." This is a really interesting phrase. It's unless you understand it correctly, it seems a bit mean. It sounds like when you first hear it, like, my dad's just died. Can't I at least go to the funeral, please? If that was the case, you would say, sure, go to the funeral and then come follow me. But no, his dad's not dead. What he's actually saying is, follow me now. Don't wait around 5, 10, 20 years until your dad dies and then say, now I'm going to follow God. In other words, there are people like this. They say, I want to follow God, but first I want to, get married and have a family, or first I want to build my business, or first I want to have fun, and then I'll follow the Lord after I've had fun. People have all their things they want to do first and then follow God. But Jesus is saying, no, let the dead bury their own dead, was his answer to this man. But that phrase itself is also interesting because he's using the word dead in two different ways in the same sentence. He's saying, let the spiritually dead bury those who are physically dead. In other words, there are people out there who are not following me. There are people out there who are dead to God. Let them do that. But, you follow me. And so that phrase of Jesus shows us that when Jesus talks, he's not talking in the way we think. He uses this double language. And I've noticed it all the way through Jesus, and it's all the way through the prophets as well. But of course the disciples used to get confused with this double language. And that's the reason why people get confused with the prophets, because we misunderstand it by reading it with singular frame of reference instead of double frame of reference. Anyway, I just had to point that out because I think it's a really, really clear example of the way that Jesus thought and spoke. And also, don't wait until some other later date to follow Jesus. Follow him now. The chapter finishes with the casting out of a demon, or actually demons out of two men into a herd of pigs. In Mark's Gospel, in Mark and Luke's Gospel, there's only one demon-possessed man. In this Gospel, there are two. The answer is there's two. It's just that in Mark and Luke's Gospel, they're just mentioning the one really, really bad man that had the demon, and the other man with him wasn't mentioned. There's actually two in the story. Sometimes people think that the Bible contradicts itself, but it's just a way of, it's as ancient documents, thousands of years old, and the way they speak and think is just different to us. So there definitely was a man there, right? But they're just not mentioning in Mark and Luke that there was another one as well. In Matthew, it tells us there were two, so we know there were two. But then in Mark's Gospel, it says there was a herd of about 2,000 pigs. So Jesus casts out the demon, but then he allows it to go into this herd of 2,000 pigs, which rush down the hill and drown themselves. And I did some Googling and worked out an average value of a pig. And pigs can grow from, little to really, really, really big. And it was around about, where's my notes here? In Australia, at the time of this video, a pig is worth, a pig is worth about $720 in Australia on average for, a good-sized pig. In other words, there's $1.4 million worth of pigs just ran over the cliff. And that's the reason why the the crowd from town came out and said, "Go away from us. You know, you're hurting our economy. We don't want you here." But, you know, it's a real struggle to think, why would Jesus, you know, allow that, kill the death of all these pigs? One thought, of course, is that pigs were banned in the Old Testament law, so why were they farming pigs in the first place? There's a thought. But on the other hand, this is the region of Gad, you know, the 12 tribes of Israel, it's the region of Gad. It was a very, very Greek area. It was, a lot of the people there weren't following the Lord. They wouldn't have known about the pig thing, you know. So there's all of these debates about what did Jesus do? Was it right? Was it wrong? In the mind of God, it was right, and there was a reason for it, and I don't understand it completely. But one thing I do understand is that in Jesus' mind, these two men were worth more than thousands of animals. And in another place in the Bible, Jesus says, "Don't worry about your life. You're worth more than many sparrows." Well, now we find out that you're worth more than thousands of animals. In the mind of God, one person is of such high value. It seems like Jesus crossed the lake just for these two people. And so you may be struggling. You may even have a demon. But you are worth more than many, many, many animals. You're of high value to the Lord. If you come to the Lord, He'll remove that demon from you too. Father, I ask that you would help us. Lord, there's so much in this chapter. I hardly said anything that could have been said. Father, I ask you to teach us. Be our teacher. Be our guide. Help us to see how much you love us. Open our hearts to the truth. Build your church, I pray. Amen.